Welcome everyone to our talk today. We have the pleasure of having a focused discussion today on women's rights in Iran. My name is Carly Ros. I'm part of the political section here at the embassy, and I'm truly thrilled to moderate today's discussion. I would also like to recognize our distinguished guests in the audience, Ms. Neda Gutmann and Mr. Omi Noripur. Thank you for joining us, and everyone, thank you for taking the time today. So just a few quick housekeeping notes. I will introduce each one of our distinguished panelists who will give introductory remarks, and then we will begin the discussion. If time permits, we will also have a brief Q&A at the end using the cards that my colleague Esme has handed out to each one of you. Panelists, when speaking, feel free to take off your masks as well, so thank you. So with that, let's begin. I am honored to introduce first our ambassador to Germany, Dr. Amy Gutmann. Ambassador Gutmann assumed her position as U.S. ambassador to Germany last month. Prior to that, she was the longest serving president of the University of Pennsylvania from 2004 to 2022. She was appointed by President Obama in 2009 to chair the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues, and held that position for 7 years. She's published widely on topics related to the topic we're going to discuss today: democracy, education, healthcare, and human rights. She was named by Fortune magazine in 2018 as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders and one of the 150 women who shake the world. So we're very lucky to have her speaking on today's panel. She graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Radcliffe College, earned a master's in political science from the London School of Economics, and her doctorate from political science at Harvard. She's married to Columbia University professor Michael Doyle, has a daughter, a son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. But most importantly, we're fortunate to have her as part of today's discussion because she's committed to the cause of women's rights and women's empowerment, which is what we're going to focus on today. Not just through her leadership that she models every day, but through initiatives that she's led throughout her career. And she looks forward to continuing that, and we look forward to that as well, here in her capacity as the first female U.S. ambassador to a unified Germany. So with that, Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Carly. And thank you all for being here. Really, it's really my honor and pleasure. I would like to recognize members of the Bundestag here, Frau Annette Wiedmann-Maus, Herr Parsi Marvi, und Herr Omid Noripur. Thank you for joining us today, and I really am honored to be part of this panel. March, as you know, is Women's History Month, and I have some prepared remarks, but I need to put them aside for at least a few moments to recognize the passing of Secretary Madeleine Albright. She was an inspiration to me and so many women. She famously said there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. She helped so many women. Some who are in the Biden administration now were mentored by her, and many, many others. She was, as you know, the first woman Secretary of State. So I would just like to say there's a special place in heaven for Madeleine Albright, and we honor her today as we mourn her loss. I also want to say that the embassy has featured many programs that examine both the history of women and women's rights, but equally importantly, the future. And I think we want to look to the future, right, in this discussion. So one of our goals, and one of my goals, is to inspire women by learning about what other women have achieved. especially in light of the daunting task of improving women's rights here and around the world. And I want to begin because I always think it's important to begin by reflecting on one's own society. We've come a long way in the United States, but we have a long way to go as well. And I am proud myself to be the first woman US ambassador to Germany, to a unified Germany. I have to say it's the greatest honor of my life to represent the US in Germany. It was also a great honor to be not the first, but the third woman to act as president of the University of Pennsylvania. And my successor is a woman as well. So that definitely sets a record among the Ivy League universities in the US. And in some sense, that's what we're aiming for, which is to have it to be the case that women's rights and women's leadership becomes something that's normal, that is something that young women can think, of course, this is something I can aspire to. Of course, the right to an education, the right to good health care, the right to achieve to my abilities is something that I, as a girl, can take, as normal. We have a long way to go. It's a special honor for me, given my family history, to be here with you today. My father came from a long lineage of German Jews, and he fled Nazi Germany in 1934. He had to. His courage, he saw the handwriting on the wall, if you will. He saw that there was a required yellow star on his parents' business in Feistwangen. And in 1934, he said to the Christian family with whom he was boarding in Nuremberg, I have to leave. In 1937, he was able to get the rest of his family, including his parents, out of Germany. And that instilled in me the need to stand up and have foresight, which I know all of you have, stand up against all forms of bigotry, hatred, and discrimination, and stand up for them before they become so bad as to exterminate millions. My mother had a very different experience in the United States, but it taught me a lesson as well, and a lesson with regard to women's rights. She, as a young girl, had loving parents, but they did not believe that women should have the opportunity for education. And she was passionate about wanting to be a teacher. So you can see how my life was inspired by both my parents, right? She was absolutely passionate about it. And she was a natural as a teacher, but she could never go to college. And she taught me how important women's rights are. And since I was the only child, my father, and one of the great things that we should realize is that since men who have children have women children as well as male children, this can be a universal cause, right? She instilled in me how important it is as a woman to get an education. And make no mistake about it, and this is how I will end my opening comments because I definitely want to hear from all of you. Let's make no mistake about it, and I can tell you that President Biden makes no mistake about it. He too, as my father was married to a strong woman, he too is married to a strong woman. Dr. Jill Biden, and he has wonderful granddaughters as well, who are several of whom are graduates of the University of Pennsylvania, as is his daughter Ashley. Make no mistake about it. In defending democracy, we must defend women's rights. Democracy depends on the defense of human rights. I would go so far as democracy means the defense of human rights and rights for women. Without that, we cannot have human rights, and without women's rights, we cannot have democracy. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those remarks. It is very true, and that's why we look forward to also hearing from you, Neda and Faravaz. You know this, Ambassador, through your father's experience, but what it means to have to leave one's country, right? So with that, let me introduce our next panelist, Ms. Neda Soltani. Born shortly before the revolution, Neda grew up under the Islamic Republic in Iran. She was a junior professor of English, literary studies, and dean at an affiliate college, Azad University, until she was forced into political exile in the summer of 2009, and she's been in Germany ever since. Her research interests include memory and migration studies, very pertinent, and she currently serves as a strategy officer for displaced scholars like herself and students at Humboldt University in Berlin. She's been vocal on human rights in Iran and is an advocate of the right to education and academic freedom. She's spoken on these issues here extensively, including to the Bundestag, and has acted as an official specialist on the German federal government's report on the status of human rights worldwide. So with that, Neda, if you could share a bit about your background and your experiences, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. It is an honor to be on this panel with you, and thank you for taking your time. Yes, as Carly kindly mentioned, I have been living in Germany as a refugee. Maybe I do not identify as a refugee on the surface when I introduce myself, but I know that this is an essential part of the identity that I have. I was forced into a life of exile in the summer of 2009 after the Green Movement, and I must admit that as such, I do not have a long history of advocating for the principles of human rights. I must admit that I am an accidental product of the aggression of a totalitarian system, which catapulted my life from being a silent scholar of English language into somebody who, because of the injustice that I personally received, needed or felt the need to raise my voice, and ever since have been in my individual capacity an advocate for the cause of human rights, and as an academician, of course, freedom of education, because Iran is a country where students, of course, it is nothing in comparison, but in Iran we also have starred students. Anyone who raises political awareness can be starred, which again is not a comparison with the horrors of Holocaust, but the idea is the same, that once you're starred, you are excluded and you are different. My background, as I said, is in academia. I was a junior professor, and in the summer of 2009, out of a media mix-up, I got mixed up with a woman whose name might resonate with everybody here in this room, although it's been 13 years almost since her tragic death, Neda Soltani. I was basically mixed up with her because of the similarity in our names and because a photo of mine was published. My Facebook profile photo was published online as being of hers, and then there was a media frenzy, obviously, because of her death, but my face and my name at the beginning accompanying her. So I was hunted down by the Iranian Secret Service within days, and then I was asked to either collaborate to wash away and say, this is me, this is my photo, I am Neda, I'm alive, and everything is fine. Something which I did not do, and then in a matter of 12 days, I found myself in a place where I had to run for my life. And now, looking at the people, I live in Berlin now, and seeing the refugees arriving from Ukraine, young women alone or with their children. I was alone. I would say, now being a mother, fortunately didn't have a child that I have to carry along with me on the road to flee the injustice. So seeing people who are arriving in Germany with literally the clothes they are carrying. I had a backpack with a borrowed laptop with me, but just the same, I very much understand, and I am very grateful for the solidarity that has been shown, and I'm hoping that this will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neda. And it's great you were paying it forward, I would say, in your capacity now that you found your place in academia here for other displaced scholars who are trying to find a way to continue the work that they started before having to leave. So
I believe that once you're an academic, you remain an academic, which is wonderful to have you here as an ambassador and in this capacity and in this function. But just, I think once you're an academic, I reinvented myself, obviously, but it is a privilege for me to be in that function as well. Thank you.
thank you for sharing your story with us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our last panelist, Faravaz. Thank you for being with us today. Faravaz Farvardin is an Iranian singer and women's rights activist living in Bavaria. She has also been living here in Germany as a refugee since 2018, so more recently arrived, but a similar experience. Born in Tehran, Faravaz started creating music from quite a young age, but had to leave Iran because of the progressive nature of her music that highlighted women's rights or otherwise face a jail sentence in her home country. She produces progressive pop and jazz music, combining Western styles with Iranian folklore and focusing also on diversity and the women's right to sing, which sadly is not permitted in Iran. After immigrating to Germany, her work has received international media coverage, including from the BBC, Deutsche Welle, and Tagesspiegel, and she's become really a leading voice on this topic for female empowerment. So Faravaz, thank you again for being with us, and could you share a bit about your background as well, please?
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming, for sure. Every platform I find, I just don't like to talk about myself because I just feel like so many women are not having such platforms, and I have to be voice of them. For sure they are them voice, they are loud, but we can raise them voice, kind of. Yesterday I've been walking in Berlin, and I saw so many things about Ukraine and so many people who try to help them, and I was thinking, like, why nothing is about Iran or Afghanistan here? It was painful, but thank you. I mean, like, I feel good finally I'm here, and having this platform to talk about what is happening and what can we do. I think everything about me Carly told. I'm not gonna talk more about myself. And I'm a singer. I wish I could only sing and stay in a studio and just produce music and do my profession. I just decided to talk, and being a feminist, an activist, because I think the politician, the activist who they should talk, they are not talking, or they are not talking about important things. And because of that, I think I have to talk, and I have to be kind of activist, because it is what it is. Like, how should I say? We say something always, we say Islamic Republic has something in common with Iranian opposition. It's misogyny. And it's everything against us women, I mean. Like, when I see the men activists are talking, because I know them, you know, I know who they are, and always I feel like, oh my God, if this government change, and if the man want to lead again everything, nothing really would change. And I think we have to more and more involve women to politics, and I really appreciate that, because this Nowruz is kind of mixed with women rights, because I think the next revolution of Iran is a women revolution, and because I think we were like kind of under lots of pressure, and we are like kind of done with everything, and we just lost everything, and just we want to change it. And kind of I want to say it's not really nice, but sometimes I want to say sometimes men used our silence, like the pain we had, the situation women had, they use it for themselves to be more powerful, to get more seen, and I'm here to talk about this, and I hope it could be helpful. Thank you.
We know it's not an easy topic. I think both of you didn't mean to find yourselves necessarily in the situation of activism that you are today, but as our ambassador rightly quoted our late Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, it really takes guts to kind of recognize your purpose and to go on that. And to the point that you made about women in Iran and the role that they have to play. Also, I think, you know, she was so wise to say that experience has shown that when women have the power, good things come from it. So,
I mean, like, we are under attack daily by like male opposition of Iran. Mm-hmm. We are feminists. They are like attacking us every day, and they have like reporting us every day. They working against us, and I always say you have to use this power for something else, not to use it against us, you know. But they do it.
Well, and speaking of power, I think this is a good segue to lead us to a question that I would like to pose to you, Madam Ambassador, that I think is likely on everyone's mind here in this room today, and that is, what is the U.S. government doing? You know, what can we do really to support women in Iran, and is this a priority for the Biden administration?
The Biden administration's perspective on Iran is that the fight for human rights must focus on defending the rights of women in Iran. And you said it eloquently as to why that's the case. Let me just say a little bit about how I see this administration focusing on that, and there's much more to come. There's, you know, Voice of America, and Voice of America began a VOA 365, and despite the fact, and it is a fact, that the Iranian regime has restricted everything from women's rights of custody over children and freedom in marriage and in divorce and women's right to an education, you name it, and the regime has not even recognized, let alone implemented, the rights that women just should have without question. On top of that, everybody should know that the Iranian regime has cracked down on freedom of speech and the press and access to Voice of America and other independent voices. That said, the Biden administration has doubled its efforts, and the audience, which is targeted at young people and young women, the audience for Voice of America increased over 50% as a consequence of this program. That's just one, but it's a really important thing to do because it's so important for those women and young people in Iran to have access to the truth, to have access to hope, right?
Yeah.
The hope in the form of hearing voices that are on their side, and not artificially so, but because that's the future, and it's the only free future for Iran that is remotely acceptable, right? So the US government also supports civil society and activism. And I have to say, last year's recipient of the Secretary's International Women of Courage Award was Shohreh Bayat. I have to say something about her because it's just amazing. So Shohreh is an Iranian chess judge. And I love the fact that you're a singer, you're an academic. Women are creative forces. And I also have to say the Biden administration, unprecedented number of women in leadership positions in foreign policy. Whether you look at, I think you all know a lot of these people, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Wendy Sherman, Toria Nuland, Karen Donfried, really important because it doesn't, men, by the way, have a very important role to play, but women can speak to their own experience as well. So it's so important. But this is Shohreh. While working at the Women's Chess World Championship, she was photographed without her head covering and was then accused of violating Iranian dress code. And the Iranian Chess Federation said she might not be able to safely return to her country without apologizing. She refused. And you identify with this, obviously, but just to show you how much courage it takes. And she's now living as a refugee in Britain without her husband, who has not been able to get permission to be with her. And in refusing, she chose to be a champion for women's rights rather than to be cowed by the Iranian government's threats. I don't know whether playing chess helped her in understanding what it means to win in something that isn't a game, it's life. But when asked why didn't you just apologize? Shohreh explained, and I love this, what she said, I know there are many Iranian women who are in prison because of protesting against hijab. Mm-hmm. If I would apologize and go back to Iran, how could I look in the eyes of Iranian women and the Iranian people? I know this is something that you yourself have basically said. Her story is an example to my mind, of the resilience and courage of women everywhere. And let me just quote the poet Maya Angelou, who said, "Each time a woman stands up for herself, she stands up for all women." So, Carly, that was a rather long answer, but it's such an important question, and I feel blessed and honored to be in the company of two women who demonstrate to us that by standing up for yourselves, you stand up for all the women and young, I would say all the boys and girls in Iran, because I know you guys understand this. It's not a good life for men not to have empowered women. Many, many years ago, I'll just tell a story. Many, many years ago, when I was a professor, we were admitting graduate students, and we had a class that was all male. And what I said to my male colleagues is, you know something? If we don't change this, not only won't we have talented women, but men won't want to come either, because it's not good for them either. So let's be honest about this. The oppression of women is good for no one. Even if some men may think it is, and it's men in power who want to keep power, it is not good for anyone.
No, all very important points, poignant points that resonate, we know, with you two especially, but I'm sure with everyone in this room as well. And I think for us here in this room, and especially for us here representing the U.S. government, it's important for us, and so I'd like to hear from the both of you, what is it that women in Iran view that we can do to actually support, right? Because we don't want to be making these decisions outside on our own as outsiders, right? And we sometimes make that mistake, I think, in humanitarian assistance, or when we want to help, our hearts are in the right place. But could you tell us from your perspective, based on your experiences in Iran with this issue, what the international community can do to really support women in Iran?
Shabbat. Actually, I think they do whatever they can for themselves, but they are brave enough, and what we can do for them is like, you know, when you're living in Iran, you forget your rights, you forget your dreams, and you believe like, I cannot be a singer because this is not my right, and still I'm fighting to believe I'm a singer. When I say I'm a singer, it's like kind of strange for me, you know. It's hard for me to believe it. And I think what we really need to tell them, they have the right to be whoever they want. First of all, they have the right to be alive, because they get killed daily, you know. So many women are beheaded like every day. It's like every day happening in Iran, and the kind of the law is really easy about this crime, you know. And I think first of all, we have to aware them about them rights, and after that we have to empower them, you know, and give them voice, because we cannot go there and bring all of, because it was first when I came to Germany, I was like, I have to bring everyone out of Iran, and I was realized you are too small, you cannot do this, you know. Let's do something else. And I realized to give them the right information, give them the voice, and try to tell them they are enough. And because, you know, our culture and our laws and everything telling, especially to women, they are not enough. And they are nobody. They just have to stay in the kitchen, cook and clean, and that's it. And sometimes when I talk about the right to sing, they say, like, we have so many bigger problems. It's not the time to talk about right to sing. But I'm telling them, like, women are dying because of not having the right to sing. And if you say, like, in Germany, doctors are not allowed to work from tomorrow, you know, what could happen? It's a big thing, and you cannot say, okay, it's not important now, because always the women issues are not important, always. And it's not easy when you immigrate too, because, for example, here I'm in a free country, I'm in Europe, but like they don't let me sing because I'm a feminist, I'm a woman, and you know, they don't like me. They like to you stay nice and kind and not speaking, just do your job and don't be loud and don't be really visible. And and something else I always talk about, like being a singer and becoming a refugee in West, it's not easy because they say, why you sing, you know, you was not like forced to sing, why you did something against your law, you know, but it wasn't in my hand, you know, I just love to sing, and as a child and as a teenager I didn't know how it will cost for me, how much it will cost in my life. And the things I think we can do, just give them for the power inside and outside, because I say it's not different if it's inside or if it's outside, because we have lots of problem outside too, because I'm as a feminist and singer, I was working on Me Too movement. And now all for example, Iranian media doesn't want to work with me because I publish something about them, you know? And here I don't have the opportunity to be seen, to do my concert. Like I can do, yes, I can cooperate with you, like Germans or other countries, but it's not easy in Iranian community to work as a activist and singer.
That is another topic that I think is important, is unity, right? And going back to supporting other women, you know, sometimes even in the broader context of the Iranian opposition, I would say there's a unity issue where, you know, you can get in each other's way. I don't know if you would say the same is true on the feminism issue and the issue of women's rights, but Neda, I want to give you the opportunity. Do you have anything to add when we're considering
just one
what
second,
it is
I just want to say something else. Carly knows, like, they are shutting down our social media daily, and especially we are women, and we doesn't have any special support because of that. This is the only way we can have the connection with Iranian people, especially women, you know. And for example, we have to find some resolution to have some kind of special support for people who are important to be in contact with women, especially, you know. My Instagram had the same problem too, and we were talking about, we have to talk about this too. Sorry.
Yep.
Please.
No, absolutely fine. Thank you. If I may, I would like to quickly add or contribute 3 points to this discussion. First of all, even for me sitting here, it is amazing what a change a generation can bring. So when I look at Faravaz, when I look at the younger women, when I look at my students in Iran, now that they are grown from those 20-year-olds who would sit in my class, look at me, and me being an inspiration for them, writing in grammar class, practicing sentences, writing, I wish I were you. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. And now they are a source of inspiration. So women talking about looking forward, moving forward, the generation, the young generation of Iranian women are a completely different class of women from my generation, going back to the generation of my mother and her mother. So there is hope in there. So when we talk about the future being female, that is it. The second point that I would like to add is that I totally agree with Faravaz, and I think all over the world, the problem of women is the right to self-determination, because it is always somebody else wanting to decide for us. Now, in an open and democratic society, it is much more nuanced and not that obvious. But when you put it in a totalitarian context like Iran, then it is very obvious, and they do not shy away from taking that right for you to be who you want to be, to live how you want to live. So this fight, if you will, to acquire the right to self-determination, I think is at the heart of the fight of women in Iran, as is the fight that all women all over the world, regardless of the nation state, the country, the continents that they are living in, are leading. And the third point, getting back to your question, yes, exactly. I think any people must decide for themselves how they want to live, and an external force coming and dictating to them, this is the way you should do it, will never work. And the Iranian society, like any other society, is so diverse that to write a prescription for the whole society and say, yes, Iranian women need this and that, we give them this and that, and they are good and we are good. It won't work like that. But what we can do is to not, in my humble opinion, not compromise when it comes to bigger questions. It is clear for everybody. We are at a turning point in human history. The last 4 weeks, I think the world has completely changed. And in this process, for greater good, if we decide that for greater good, sacrifices should be made, and if that sacrifice is the value of women in Iran fighting for their right, because here in the West we have a bigger problem. Now Russia is a bigger problem than Iran, and so we want a nuclear deal. We're going to tone it down perhaps on certain matters. This is something that, in my opinion, should never happen. I had the privilege of speaking to the human rights section of the Bundestag, and if I'm honest, they were not pleased with me criticizing them, and they asked me, what would you do? And I said, well, that's why I'm not a politician, because I know this is a difficult question, and I know that you are responsible to your people, to your state first, before you move on to helping and rescuing women elsewhere. But this is a non-negotiable. And this is something, if we say that we do not negotiate on women's right, on human right, then Iranian women, Iranian people, men and women, can do the rest for themselves. It won't be an easy way, and it won't be a quick path to democracy in Iran, exactly because what Faravaz said, we have a patriarchal system which is age-old, and it has been reinforced with the political system in the country. So it's gonna be a long road. But self-determination, it's not just about women, it is just about a nation, a society being able to determine that, to make their own mistakes, and to find the solution that works best for them. Thank you.
No, thank you, Neda. And we're running short on time, but you mentioned diversity.
Yes.
And I think it's important that we emphasize that point before we end a bit more, right? Because we're here today and partly in celebration of diversity. It's Women's History Month in March, but it's also the Persian New Year, which began earlier this week, Nowruz Mubarak, and which we will celebrate at the reception after the discussion concludes. But you both have touched on this topic, Faravaz, when you mentioned about being here as a refugee in Germany. So I just want to give the ambassador the opportunity also to speak on diversity and why this should matter to the U.S. government.
It's hard to say anything after these two wonderful women have spoken. To really, I couldn't agree more. So let me just say that our priorities here at the embassy are absolutely aligned with what you were saying. We began by talking about defending democracy means defending women's rights. And you're right, women's rights are non-negotiable. I mean, that is the bedrock of democracy. In order to be more creative, we have to be inclusive. I mean, women are creators, not only of humanity, but look at the creativity right here. And as you said, it's generational. It just gets more and more creative as we look at younger and younger generations. Why? Because they see more opportunity, even through the oppression and horrors of regimes like the Iranian regime. So we're going to be more innovative by being more inclusive. And then you spoke, and I have to speak about allying together across nationalities, across generations, and across genders and sexual orientations. And I have to say, we at the embassy feel very much that our German colleagues also are dedicated to moving this forward. And with regard to the Iranian regime, not allowing it to have go nuclear is a non-negotiable for us, I just have to say, and for this administration. So with all that, I do have to say, I look forward to celebrating the new year and new generations and the empowerment of women and human rights and women's rights moving forward. So thank you for having us. Thank you so much. And thank you all for sponsoring with us this wonderful event.
Yes, thank you. So with that, we welcome everyone to join us in the courtyard for the reception and look forward to continuing the conversation over there. And we will help you all find your way. So thank you, Madam Ambassador, for being with us today. Thank you, Neda. Thank you, Faravaz, for sharing your insights and your experiences with us in this important topic. And we look forward to continuing work together on this important topic because, as we all know, there is still much work to be done. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.